Hello everyone and welcome back to Deansbury Town. My name is Liam and in this video I'm going to continue with the development of the station and the shopping street scene. At the end of the last video I'd got as far as a very basic mock-up to demonstrate my general idea for the corner was going to look okay. This time however I'm making a more detailed mock-up of the key components that make up this area to give me a clearer idea of how big the buildings need to be and exactly where everything's going to fit before I can get stuck into the real detailed construction. To do this I needed a firm base to work on, so I made a really quick framework out of cardboard strips to match the height of the existing platforms, and on top of this I rested the template that I previously made in the last video. This brought everything up to a nice even platform on which I could start making the mock-ups. I wanted to start work on the buildings at the back and work my way forward to minimise reaching over the rooftops and damaging the buildings, a lesson I've learned from previous areas on the layout. However, as the platform width is the most critical dimension here, I needed to get this fixed, so the first thing to do was to mock up the retaining wall. The prototype at Hanley is mainly red brick but with a blue brick arch over the recesses. Unlike many retaining walls from the photos I have, it does appear to be vertical. So to make this archway I turned to Inkscape and I found the blue brick arch in the Scale Scene Small Arch Bridge Kit was about the right size, so I imported this into Inkscape. From this part I was able to sketch out the rest of the wall using this as the key dimension. Starting with my planned height of 60mm and the dimensions from the arch. From here it was a simple case of just continuing to duplicate until I had enough length of wall. To get the waiting room elements in the right place, I sketched out a couple of different staircase geometries and picked out the one I thought would give me the right dimensions to fit in the space I had and looked about right with the overall layout setting. From this I could sketch out the location of the platform face of the waiting room, and the door and the window positions were worked out by counting bricks from the photographs I had. These parts could then be layered over the long run of arches to give me the full length of the retaining wall. I then printed the full length of the retaining wall out in separate sections and glued it to thin card. With the wall then in place, another section of supporting card was made up to bring the road level to match that of the new high level station, and the top was fashioned from thin strips of card. This gave me a good idea of the amount of space I then had to play with to create the street scene. Before we get into the detail of the street scene, let's have a closer look at the station. The station is going to sit on the left hand side of the retaining wall, and out of the right hand end of the building will be the stairs that go down to the platform and the waiting room, which we can see here occupies arches 11 to 13. When this is made, the arches are actually going to be recessed into the retaining wall and the waiting room sits in the gap with a canopy roof. Protruding from the right hand side of the station will be the overbridge leading over to the tracks, but that's going to come along much later on. So let's take a little bit more of a detailed look at the street scene. To help make the shop seem a little further into the distance, I decided to use a small amount of forced perspective, so these buildings are going to be modelled in 3.5mm to the foot. As they're on a gentle curve, I wanted to try and get this to look natural and not too sharp. Try and blend in the transitions between the full buildings, the part relief, and then the very low relief that borders the back scenes. To start with, I checked a couple of the typical buildings and my original back scene for size and estimated a width of between about 70 and 80mm would be right for these buildings. So I sketched these onto the base template in pencil with a gentle curve and then measured the distance from the back wall for each corner to give me effectively a set of coordinates for the corner point of each building. I then took these dimensions into Inkscape and using the nominal 70 or 80mm wide buildings, I started to form the basis of the street. Each of the blue guidelines seen here represents the lower front corner of one of the buildings, and this showed I could fit in around 6 buildings around this curve, gently following the curve of the road. We can see here that 4 of the buildings in the middle can be pretty much close to full depth, and the ones in the corner are a kind of tapered low relief as the back scene comes in. I find it much easier creating model buildings that are very closely based on real buildings for inspiration, with adjustments to suit the size and the position on the layout. I used Google Maps and Street View to search for suitable inspiration in the Hanley area to keep with the local theme, and I found a few buildings I thought would fit in. So, time for my favourite pastime, counting bricks, but remembering to adjust my scale calculator to 3.5mm to the foot to give that extra little bit of force perspective. I counted the key horizontal and vertical dimensions of each building and built up the overall size for the 4 different buildings, looking at the various different elements of brick, windows and all the trim elements that go into making it up. I used a very similar method to that used for the arches to create the outline of the front facade of each building. I wasn't worried too much about the detail at this stage, as this was just to give me the overall dimensions and make sure I got the look and feel about right. The detail will come later. So let's take a quick look at the buildings and their basic mock-up. Here we have a pub. I've taken this and I've reversed its direction to suit the layout. Next up we have Wrights. I think this is a bakery, and I've just taken the single building here for inspiration. Next is this, again a shop building, but a little bit more simple, a little bit shorter. And then finally the last building is a sort of double width building, a little bit of interest with the different type of roof line here. And I'm going to create an alleyway here through to the back. Moving back over to the layout now, I've installed all of the mock-ups back into the station corner. So you can see the arches in the foreground with the station building on top, and the stairway leading down through arches 9 and 10 into the waiting area. And then in the background we've got the first of the mock-ups of the shops installed in situ. So I'm glad I've done this piece of work here, and to me it proves that everything's going to fit in quite nicely and make a believable scene. So just looking now in a little bit more detail of what we're trying to create here. So these are the last arches here. I think I'm going to taper the height of these down to a smaller wall around about this height, similar to what this bit of cardboard is in the background. And then the line of roofs of the houses there will gradually make their way up behind the station building to form the back side of a street, and then the gap here is where the road's going to go down between the two. So the line of the buildings is not taking a big step. It's quite a gentle transition from these houses up to the buildings behind the station, which I think that bit works out quite well. And then in the middle of the scene here, we can see the platform depth here is relatively sufficient for a sort of town station. We've got the station building here. This white piece is going to be the roof of the stairs down. We can see the outline of the stairs going out the side of the building here. And then this will be the waiting room. These arches here will be recessed nominally into this gap here, and then with the pavement running along the background. I think the row of shops at the back there form quite a believable scene. I've not mocked up this building here, but it does show that I can get a small triangular building there to help blend that into the last low relief buildings that will go in this corner here. And then finally on the far right hand side, we've got the angled pub here, and again that is going to blend into some low relief buildings, and the road will disappear into the back scene here. I'm going to put another sort of angled building in the foreground here to hide that road transition, and then some extended paving in this area here, and then we'll transition to low relief back scene, and that will go all the way up the hill and take us to the high level town along this part of the back scene and the retaining wall. a little bit difficult to make out from this angle, but in the back corner here we can get a little bit more detail. We can get some extra full relief of these buildings in the middle here and create the backs of the row of buildings further back. So that's some detail I'm going to try and incorporate. And through this building here in the middle, I'm hoping to create a little archway and an alleyway through to create a bit of interest, so you can peer through that alleyway and see the detail of the buildings or the yard in the background. Well, that concludes today's video. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you have, please give a thumbs up. And if you've got any feedback, please leave them in the comments below. And I'll see you in the next video. Bye for now.